Greetings everyone, Nick here with another Author's Notes edition of the Planet Ripple Logs, this time covering Log 2, Truth, pages 22 through 38 of the first volume. And right away you may have noticed, this is a funny looking comic book cover. That's because it's not. Since these aren't compilations of separate monthly issues, I often like to use the space between chapters to info dump, share concept art, that kind of thing. Because when you're building a new world like this, there's a ton of exposition to communicate to new readers, and dumping it all on them at once can get overwhelming. So this is one of a few tricks I use to lighten the load on readers. Instead of an incredibly forced scene where Mino or someone else awkwardly drops what they're doing to explain what ships are, we can just have the book tell us. This way it feels less like it's interrupting the story, even though it quite literally is. Now as the books go on, and most of this world building is eventually covered, I do start using more traditional illustrations as chapter covers, but these are the early days. We get a couple ship designs here. Little Cherned, a pretty average size for this world, only 456 feet. Ironically named since Cherned means river, and rivers don't exist in this world. I mean, maybe with a nice garden setup, you could have a little artificial river that loops into a fountain or something, but that's as close as it gets. The Bellina, on the other hand, is 1,900 feet. That's almost twice the length of the USS Nimitz, one of today's largest aircraft carriers. And that ship's gonna be replaced in a year by the USS John F. Kennedy, which is only 14 feet longer. And both those ships can each carry about 5,000 to 6,000 people. So when you consider the internal volume a more round ship like the Bellina must have, it's kinda crazy that there's only 2,000 people on it and not like 10 or 15,000 people. But keep in mind they have to grow most of their own food. And it's an old ship, like centuries. So there are parts of it that aren't even occupied by people anymore because they're so run down or unsanitary. Which is really saying something if you look at Mino's living conditions. So yeah, living on a big ship like this, it can be pretty lonely for someone like her. Christina, the lady we saw ever so briefly in the last chapter, and Kelsey, the guy who called Mino the Arsler, are auntie and nephew. So it's not hard to see where Kelsey picked up his habits. Also, holy crap, I don't know why I made him so big here. He looks like a stun. He slims down pretty quick. And he's not the only one who changes. Mino's hair is much redder than it would later be. And Seth Weaver, another character in this chapter, he transforms the most. I don't mean over the course of a few books, or even by the end of this book. By the very next page after he's introduced, he's darker skinned, his face is built differently, his hair is different, he's slightly thinner. It's so weird going back to these early pages, and seeing these characters that I just need to draw a few more times before I really settled on what I wanted them to look like. I kinda like that about these early chapters though. It feels like a pilot episode for a TV series, where some characters are played by different actors, or in the case of animation are drawn or voiced differently. It's just fun looking back and going like, what if Planet Ripple stayed like this? What if Mino did have bright red anime hair, or if Kelsey continued being this thick, or if Seth stayed this thick? Anyway, Mino's begging Christina to let her go topside and visit someone named Puppy, and it sounds like she'll get what she wants after the day's work, but not if Kelsey has anything to say about it. This visual of Mino's prized giraffe, just ripped up in a dirty toilet, it's still one of the more disturbing visuals in the comic to me. We get a couple flashbacks in this chapter to 12 years ago, the day Mino came into Andrea's life, carried by dolphins. Mino was in bad shape. She was bleeding, she was freezing to death. If Andrea wasn't such a good listener, if she just went back inside and let her ship dive right then and there, Mino would be gone. That'd be it. That'd be the entire story of Planet Ripple. Bye. Once again, I love using like one color to dominate a scene and convey a mood. In this case, the blue is, slightly hopeful. And the next scene's bright, extremely stark red is Mino's anger, as she just lets Kelsey have it. And a funny thing happens to Kelsey here. Up until now, he's basically seen Mino as a doormat. But now that she's standing up for herself, I mean, it doesn't always work with bullies. But he starts to see her a little differently after his auntie lets Mino have it. She just outright tells Mino that she should have died instead of Andrea. And everyone in the room more or less agrees. And as wordy as this scene is, as much as I would trim out of Christina's dialogue to make it more succinct, I'm glad 2016 me had the sense to have no words on the next page. Just let the illustrations do the talking. Like I said last episode, I want my comics to feel like storyboards, like you're watching a movie. And in a shot like this, what needs to be said? Now, this scene, where Kelsey comes to check on Mino and apologize, and she's keeled over in the Yamcha pose, I swear that was not intentional. It looks to Kelsey like Mino killed herself because of what he did or what his aunt said. But no, Mino isn't suicidal, just very, very sick. Now, this second flashback to the day Mino was recovered is one of my favorites in the series because of how it blurs the lines between past and present. This isn't being beamed to us, the readers, for our benefit. This is Mino's flashback. Her life is flashing before her eyes. So when she wakes up in a hospital bed, it's just like the day she woke up in Andrea's care. So it takes her a moment to realize she's not waking up 12 years ago, she's waking up now. And as Dr. Weaver explains, what almost killed her just now is the same thing that almost killed her then. A bad kidney. That day Andrea found her, Mino had a shard of metal lodged in her kidney, so Andrea had it replaced with a cyborg one. But that one stopped working a few months before the story picks up. And Mino's only finding this out just now because her one good kidney has also failed. So the doctor only saved her by removing the good kidney and effectively resuscitating the cyborg one, which could still give out at any moment, so yeah, Mino's on borrowed time. We also see just how horribly mismatched Mino's limbs are. Most of them were made for different people, bigger people than her, especially her left arm. It would be better if she just went around without it. But this is where things finally start looking up for Mino. Kelsey fixed up her stuffed animal, she gets a sponge bath, and she used to look worse here. When I originally colored this scene, her skin was gray except the inflamed areas, those were even worse. That scar going up her side, she looked like a zombie. But she's getting the care she needs. She gets a new arm, we get to see a Vitae injection in action, we'll get into that a little bit. Mino gets a much nicer space to live in, and she even gets to see Puppy, Andrea's sea dog. So I wanted Mino to have a pet, and a seal was just the perfect fit for her. A fully flooded world, no land for the longest time, seals would drown. So, just like wolves followed us around, eating whatever scraps we left behind during our hunts, seals would follow ships, and they'd start spending more and more time aboard with us, until thousands of years later, we fully domesticated them. And Puppy here, he doesn't care that Mino's different. He doesn't care that her hands are cold and hard. He's just happy knowing it's her. So that's log 2. If these videos show anything, it's just how rough around the edges Planet Ripple was. But you know, that rawness, if my readers are to be believed, is part of the appeal of these early chapters. Just how raw the world is, how raw Mino is, how raw her health issues are, how raw the colors are. It's all just laid bare. It makes these early chapters kind of intense, and that intensity is kind of what got people hooked. I hope you're having fun with these videos. I'm gonna do one more of these chapter breakdowns before I do another lore video. If you want to support this project, you can just get my books on Amazon or itch.io. Or if you want special signed copies mailed by yours truly, you can support my Patreon page, where you'll also see videos like this a week early. See you next time with more of the Planet Ripple Logs. Toodles.